Hey everyone, it's Chase Elleby with Williams Elleby along with Joel Williams, and we are coming to you today with week 21 in our series of 52 weeks of personal injury. And today we're going to talk about whether or not you actually need an injury attorney. Now chances are if you've clicked on this video and you've been hurt by someone else's negligence, you probably do need an injury attorney. But Joel, why don't we go over some examples of when you should look at whether or not to hire an injury attorney?
Yeah, so we'll just go through maybe like 15 different ones and try not to get too in depth with them and just go through the situations and why it's important that you get an attorney after these situations. But the first one I'd say is a car wreck.
Right.
And you need an attorney after a car wreck because you're going to be dealing with insurance companies. There are certain things that you need to do to make sure that all of your damages are covered, and you need to do them quickly. So after a car wreck, I would say it's important to get in touch with a personal injury attorney as soon as possible so that he or she can advise you on what you need to do in order to document the scene, in order to get medical treatment, in order to preserve your ability to pursue a claim if you need to, or an uninsured motorist claim, and generally follow the right steps so that you don't end up doing something that could hurt your case later on down the road.
Right. And another, I guess, I'll kind of mush these two together, but any sort of premises liability or negligent security incident, right? So when I say premises liability, that typically is like a slip and fall at a restaurant or at a business, or walking down the sidewalk and you fall and injure yourself. Premises liability or a negligent security case rather is where you're at an apartment or a gas station and you get shot and robbed, right? The same underlying legal theory applies to those types of cases, and that is the business owner has a duty or an obligation to keep its premises safe. So in those situations, it's very important to contact an attorney and possibly even hire an attorney, because you've got to put the business owner on notice, right, that there's been a claim. Also send a letter, a spoliation letter, to say preserve any evidence that you may have, things like CCTV video, any incident reports, and things like that.
Yep. And there's certain wording that you need to use in those letters, so it's important to get advice from an attorney before you send those.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I want to take it back to car wrecks again, but I would say another situation where you need a personal injury attorney is if you're injured by a drunk driver. Okay, so this can be not necessarily where the drunk driver hits the vehicle you're in. You could be in the vehicle with the drunk driver, or you may be the vehicle they hit, or you could be a pedestrian, or you could be riding a bicycle, or anything like that where a drunk driver hits you. Those cases have aggravating circumstances, and there may be types of damages that you're entitled to beyond just the physical bodily injury type damages that you typically see after a car wreck. So you really need to seek the advice of an attorney to find out whether you may be entitled to punitive damages and what type of damages you're entitled to in the state that you live in, because those type laws do vary greatly from state to state. So get in touch with an attorney quickly if you are injured by a drunk.
Yeah, medical negligence, right? That's another one. ER malpractice, physical therapy malpractice, podiatry malpractice. There's a list of medical professions that if you're injured or alleged to be injured by their negligence, you definitely want to hire an attorney, because attorneys will have to get an expert to review those medical records to see whether or not the standard of care for that specific profession was in fact breached and caused the damages that we allege were caused by that conduct. And the way the Georgia law is that you have to get a medical expert to opine in an affidavit that standard of care was breached before you even file a lawsuit, right? So it's not like most other claims where you can just file the lawsuit. There's a lot of work that goes in on the front end of those types of cases, so it's always important to contact a lawyer with any type of professional negligence, or medical negligence type cases.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you right now, when it comes to medical negligence cases, if somebody calls me on a med-mal case and they've been trying to handle it on their own for a year, I'm not taking that case.
Yeah, no time.
Because if they're not a lawyer,
right,
and they don't follow the very specific steps you have to follow, they've already screwed it up.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not interested in trying to fix it. Whereas with a car wreck case, there are plenty of car wreck cases that you may be able to handle on your own.
Sure.
If, for example, this may be a situation where you don't need an injury attorney, is if you're in a wreck, you're sore, maybe you go to urgent care, and then you're fine after 3 days, and you're just dealing with a $100 urgent care bill and the property damage. It may not be worth your time to hire a personal injury attorney. But if it turns out that your injuries are much worse than you originally thought they were, and the insurance company gives you a hard time, then you may need to reach out to an attorney. And in those situations, it's much easier to come in and step in and make sure things are done right from that point going forward. But when it comes to a professional malpractice case, if you don't have an attorney involved ASAP and you do something to mess it up, you may have killed your case forever. Right. So the next one I would say is if you are riding a bicycle and you are hit by a car. We see that a lot, especially in North Georgia, where there's a lot of bicycle trails on the sides of the road. I mean, you have equal right to the roadway as a car does in most situations. And we all know with cell phones and all the different things that can distract us that you may very well get hit by a car and hurt. And those can be very difficult cases because people say, you should have known riding a bicycle on a road that this may happen. So you're going to run into some difficult defenses there, and it will always help if you have an attorney on your side for bicycle accident cases.
Yeah. Dog bite's another one, right? We see that often. Everyone's got dogs. There's a lot of county ordinances that are in place, depending on the county where you live, like leash laws and things like that you got to look into. But that is, we get a lot of calls on dog bite cases, quite honestly. And a lot of it has to do too with what the owner knew or should have known about their dog and whether or not it's a vicious dog and what the circumstances are around that actual bite, right? Was it, you had a neighbor over and they're playing with the dog and the dog bit him, or were you walking on the sidewalk just outside and somebody let their dogs out and they go running after you and, bite you? Or even if you're chased by a dog and you happen to fall as you're running away from a dog, right? If that dog wasn't on a leash, and that, liability can then, be imposed on the owner. So any type of incident where there's a dog involved, it's always important to call a lawyer.
Yep. I'd say also it's important to call an injury lawyer if you're injured and don't have health insurance. Yep. Of course, if you're injured by somebody else, it's negligence, because if you're injured by your own negligence, then, there's not somebody else to sue for that.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
Suck it up and deal with it. Yeah. But if you don't have health insurance, it can be very difficult to find a doctor or medical provider that will treat you. But most personal injury attorneys that deal with injured victims on a daily basis know which medical providers in their area will be willing to treat that person on a lien, or in other words, they will hold their bill until the end of the case and then get paid back out of any recovery. But there's usually a network of those doctors that an attorney can put you in touch with in the event that you don't have health insurance.
Right, it's like spot insurance, right? For people who don't have that health insurance involved in a wreck, that insurance is there to cover for those types of injuries and treatment. They just get paid on the back end of the case. So I would say, we could talk about kind of subsets within these types of, a car wreck case could lead to a wrongful death case and things like that. But I think it's also important kind of to put it all together. There's work injury type cases that is important to contact a lawyer if you've been injured on the job, because whereas, just a general negligence case where it's a car wreck or something, a slip and fall, if it's a work injury, there's a whole different subset of laws that apply specifically to the work injury under the workers' comp laws of the state of Georgia. Okay, with comp, everything's pretty much already laid out for you, because in exchange for not suing your employer for causing your injuries or anything like that, comp is a no-fault system, meaning that they're not even going to question whether or not the employer's at fault. They're just going to go ahead and cover whatever those injuries might be. So it's always important if you've been injured on the job to contact a lawyer to see whether or not, one, if you need a lawyer to help you with that comp case, but two, to make sure that you're doing everything right under the comp system.
Yep. Also, going back to road wrecks and those subsets that Chase is talking about, if you've been hit by a tractor trailer, it's usually a good idea to get in touch with a lawyer, because there are different rules. There's also obviously the rules of the road. Don't speed, don't run stop signs, stay in your lane, all of that kind of stuff. But there's also another set of regulations called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations that govern tractor trailer drivers and their employers, or the trucking companies, as well as the insurance companies that insure those companies. So there may be additional ways to prove negligence on behalf of a trucking company or a truck driver, and you're going to need a lawyer that's familiar with those rules and regulations in order to maximize the value of your claim. So if you're hit by a tractor trailer driver, get in touch with an injury lawyer.
Yeah, that's, and there's a million other, I'm sure, situations we could talk about when you need a lawyer, but I think generally speaking, just kind of a bit, taking a wide brush, is if you're injured and it's someone else's fault or could be someone else's fault, it's always important to contact a lawyer to see whether or not there's, a claim to be made.
And you're exactly right about that, Chase. When someone else hurts you and it's not your fault, you need to get an injury lawyer to look into what kind of insurance coverage may be available. But sometimes you'll do that and the insurance company will deny coverage or deny fault or say that their insured is not at fault for causing your injuries. In those situations, you definitely need to get in touch with a lawyer that can gather the evidence, gather the information, present the claim to the insurance company in a way that may persuade them to fairly compensate you for the injuries that you sustained. Also, if you have lost a loved one, a spouse, a child, sometimes a parent, in a car wreck or any other kind of situation, and you need to bring a wrongful death claim or get an estate set up for the person that is deceased, you're going to need the help of a lawyer there.
Yeah, for sure.
So what about situations involving falling trees or tree limbs?
Yeah, that happens a lot, right? Atlanta's a city in the trees, right? So there's trees everywhere around here, and people are always outside wanting to get, do their nature hikes and things like that. We've handled cases where trees have fallen and limbs have fallen, ice storms too, that's another example. But it's definitely important because you might not think, trees fall all the time. You might not think automatically, okay, well, someone is responsible for that. But a lot of cases, people are responsible for that, right? If it's a park that you're invited to come and hike and walk through, whoever the owner is of that property, they have an obligation to make sure that there's no rotting trees or no visibly rotting trees, and make sure it's safe for people to be out there hiking. Yep.
And also it depends on whether you're in a city, a metropolitan area, or the country, right? So you probably need a lawyer to help determine what law applies, because even within the state of Georgia, where that tree is located, whether it's in an urban area or the middle of the woods in the country, different laws apply.
Right.
So
different obligations.
You're going to need somebody to help you understand those. I would say another situation is when you're a pedestrian. You may be in a crosswalk, you may not be in a crosswalk, you may be on a sidewalk, you may not be on a sidewalk. And there are definitely cases that are stronger than others. And if it's a situation where the law is going to prevent you from getting a recovery, it's still a good idea to talk to a lawyer, because at least you'll have that peace of mind and will have had that conversation with the lawyer, so you know what, this probably isn't worth pursuing. Or you can talk to the lawyer and they say, absolutely, this is a case you need to pursue, and this is the evidence we need to start gathering.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I think the last one we need to talk about is if your child is injured at somewhere like a daycare.
Yeah, daycare injuries, they happen pretty often, right? So right from the start, which is the entity that governs all Georgia daycares and things like that, they have standards and guidelines that all daycares and schools have to follow. So yeah, if your child's injured in a daycare, it's always important to hire a lawyer, because a lot of these daycares too, they have cameras and things like that, so you got to send them that initial preservation of evidence letter to make sure that nothing is spoliated or damaged or things like that, so you can start to gather evidence of what might happen, or what did happen to cause an injury.
Yep. And so that's all we're really going to cover today, but there are other situations, like Chase said earlier. If you're injured due to somebody else's fault, it's usually a good idea to reach out to an attorney. There's other products liability, assaults by police officers. I don't know, that's just some other things that can come to the front of mind. But if you are hurt and it's not your fault or somebody else's fault, at least reach out to an attorney and get their opinion on whether you have a case and whether you have a good case, so you can make your own decision as to whether you want to hire that attorney and pursue a claim. So I think that's about it for week number 21. If this video has been helpful to you, we would appreciate you giving us a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and insert any comments in the section below if you can think of other situations where somebody may need a personal injury attorney. Otherwise, we will see you next week for video number 22.